I think being performance marketers, it's so easy to look in Google Ads, especially today when, Google Ads for the most part is going to show some positive signs if you're doing it right. But then really coming back and saying, well, how's the business doing? And then having those conversations. And it's crazy that some of the same conversations today are still the conversations that I was having when I started in 2007. But it's really the truth of the matter is this creative raising interest in category or raising interest in my exact product that I'm advertising? So that is always a question. Or, are our other channels creating customers that don't have the best lifetime value? And I think about when I'm going to pull from when I was working at Nationwide Insurance, right? So they had, the partnerships with NASCAR, and you could get people to sign up for their auto insurance right at the booth at a NASCAR race. But the type of customer that's going to come in, get an auto quote, sign up at a NASCAR race, that lifetime value is going to be vastly different than the person who has their auto, their home, their all their power sports. It is just fundamentally a different customer from a value standpoint and from how complicated it would be to move that client and go find another policy.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Given that search remains foundational to Did It, I'm always excited to have fellow search marketing experts on the podcast. So Sarah Stemen and I will both be at the Brighton SEO conference in San Diego shortly. So let's start with the session you'll be doing at Brighton. What's the topic of your session, Sarah?
So I'm going to be talking about the art of paid search projections and talking about why companies even want projections besides the obvious. So I'll start at the basic. They want to know how much they're going to get for what they pay. But then I talk about why they actually care about impressions and clicks when we don't necessarily talk about impressions and clicks in our language anymore. And I'll talk through that from the perspective of sort of a C-suite executive and why they care about these things.
That's a great topic. And it ends up overlapping into some other forms of media as well, because particularly for folks who bought media for a long time, in particular, who bought local media, they're used to sitting across lunch from a person selling them radio spots or TV spots, or advertising in a newspaper. And they're used to basically saying, well, if I buy more, does the price go down? Right? Because you get a volume discount with all those. And paid search was really the first significant media type where the more of it you wanted, the more of it you had to pay, the more you had to pay at the margin for everything that you were buying. And so that took a long time for folks in media buying departments and for marketing executives to start to understand, wait a minute, I don't get a volume discount. No, actually, it's quite the opposite. The more aggressive you want to be, the more you're going to pay because you're fighting somebody else for those clicks. So you better know which clicks are the most valuable. So when you take over an account and you realize, oh my goodness, they weren't actually paying for the best clicks. What are the issues you see most commonly when you take over an account?
Oh, geez. I mean, the tough part. So I have worked, from anyone managing accounts as small as 500 to all the way up to multi-million-dollar accounts. And unfortunately, I see this across all spend levels. I handle that conversation carefully without necessarily throwing someone under the bus. But I would say the way I manage accounts is I have that as a conversation. So I give a lot of analogies. I think that always helps. And I say, would you believe me if I told you that you are hiring the best paid search person in the country for $20,000? So I don't believe that these clicks that are 15, 16 cents, 25 cents are actually the most valuable clicks to you when you're selling a car. And so we talk through it with some types of analogies that sort of helps them think, oh, wait, okay, I understand. And then we look at their conversion and we back into those numbers and what they should be. And then I pull in my experience. I say, I would expect this to be around, $1.50 or $2.10. And we look at what I would expect to see. And then I brace that business owner for, as we start to move those clicks to, quote unquote, better quality, what that's going to look like from their impressions, their clicks, because it is even, I wouldn't say even the C-suite level, when you're not in these metrics every single day, you can't just rattle them off the top of your head. And so I'm always really sensitive for how I take them through that journey and get them to the strategy that's not buying these lower quality clicks. But then in other cases, I think about when local was rolled into Performance Max and how that changed that dynamic, because we have some clients that have seasonal products. So like any type of lawn equipment or something like that, where you run a campaign in the summer and you might not see that until the next year. And then local campaigns went away, Performance Max came. And so we need to have that conversation with what local was doing versus what Performance Max is doing and how we can shift in either direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, Google, of course, has been tweaking Performance Max for the last few years continuously. But what often doesn't get factored into Performance Max, if you choose to turn it on, and we often run parallel campaigns with Performance Max and non-Performance Max to have more control. But one of the things that is often sort of left out of the calculus within Performance Max is lifetime customer value in the case of e-commerce, or even in the case of B2B, the difference in lead quality between leads that come from one portion of a campaign or one set of keywords and leads that come from another portion of a campaign and other keywords, because not all leads are created equal. They know that in B2B, and certainly e-commerce managers know that not every customer is created equal. Some are going to end up purchasing for a long time at higher average order values, and some purchase once. And the extent to which you can predict that in paid search makes a huge difference of account structure and such. And Performance Max tends to sort of blend in immediate KPIs and manage to those much more effectively than it can against LTV numbers or lead quality numbers. Any thoughts on how people should think about when to turn Performance Max on, when to turn it off, or how to deal with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, since it includes that shopping component, if you are an e-commerce client, you should at least start with Performance Max. And I agree with the managing shopping at the same time, because we know Performance Max is doing a lot of that retargeting on-site traffic. So unfortunately, it's a place where you sort of have to play. That being said, and this is kind of ties into what I'll be talking about with Brighton. It looks and performs, at least in the interface, like a bottom of the funnel campaign, like a bottom of the funnel shopping. And so you have to really look at that data and play with that. And then to your point, know that client. So whenever I'm speaking, I always have a client that I'm thinking about. And the client that I think about a lot of times is a high-end retail client where those products last 15, 20 years. And so they don't necessarily have that customer lifetime value. And then how does Performance Max fit into that part of the equation? I see it most of the time as being a sort of high level shopping campaign, and it doesn't go further down funnel. I guess when I say down funnel, I mean upwards, right? So it doesn't go to less conversionary tactics. I don't see it going as much into discovery and YouTube. However, I also have some ROAS sort of safety nets on there. So it just depends. And then I think as far as the customer lifetime value, still to this day, a lot of clients, and it's not their fault, it's just how the industry's been. They're not as sophisticated as we would like to think. And so I think it's about partnering with them and making sure we help them come up with those answers. And so it's sort of taking marketing and marrying it with IT in that regard. And I mean, it's funny, I started doing this in 2007. And when I was at Nationwide Insurance, right, I was on the corporate side. So the digital marketing team would join with IT for a couple of years, and then they'd go apart, and then act as an agency, and it would be just marketing and IT separate. And then we'd report up to the same, CMO, and then it would, go back and forth because of this varied concept.
Right. Well, you make an excellent point in that being able to optimize and maximize LTV ends up often being aspirational as opposed to something that's executional right out of the gate, because having the back end business intelligence that knows the difference between your best customer and your average customer, as well as then figuring out, well, okay, what makes them different, right? Is it geography? Is it whatever their first product was that they bought? Is that predictive, right?
Yep.
And it takes a lot of data lifting and the ability to get to the data, and not everybody's ready, right? And that's okay, right? So it's not that we want to blame anybody for not having this data at their fingertips. It's really more aspirational. Ask the question, say, oh, by the way, do you have this data somewhere? Can we get at it? And, we like to start appending keyword source data and channel source data of clicks, and sometimes even impression data if we can get it from display and other sources into the back-end business intelligence, so we can figure out what predicts the best customer, right? Because you otherwise you reach a point of diminishing returns in search when you're like up against that efficient frontier, and you can't push any further without wasting money, and you don't want to do that.
No, and it's it's never a shameful thing, because like I said, I've seen it across large clients with very, very large budgets, and it's just about putting the right people together and having those conversations, and frankly, choosing an agency that's willing to have those conversations, because I think being performance marketers, it's so easy to look in Google Ads, especially today when, Google Ads for the most part is going to show some positive signs if you're doing it right. But then really coming back and saying, well, how's the business doing? And then having those conversations. And it's crazy that some of the same conversations today are still the conversations that I was having when I started in 2007. But it's really the truth of the matter is this creative raising interest in category or raising interest in my exact product that I'm advertising? So that is always a question. Or, are our other channels creating customers that don't have the best lifetime value? And I think about when I'm going to pull from when I was working at Nationwide Insurance, right? So they had, the partnerships with NASCAR, and you could get people to sign up for their auto insurance right at the booth at a NASCAR race. But the type of customer that's going to come in and get an auto quote, sign up at a NASCAR race, that lifetime value is going to be vastly different than the person who has their auto, their home, their all their power sports. It is just fundamentally a different customer from a value standpoint, and from how complicated it would be to move that client and go find another policy. And same with the online space, right? So if I'm going to go out and buy an auto quote today, bind it, and have that policy, that capability is there. But is that the best client for the business, for the longevity of where that customer is going, is really that bigger question. And we can answer that through paid search as long as those questions are being asked.
Yeah, one other thing that people don't realize how powerful paid search and just monitoring paid search is that it tends to be a leading indicator that is a byproduct of your other marketing. And that could be earned media marketing or paid media marketing. Because I don't know if you've seen it back in your Nationwide days, you've seen it with other clients, but we certainly see that if we have access to the media plan, it's one of the reasons that it acquired 11 other agencies to become full services. We wanted to be, in some cases, AOR and be controlling the other parts of the media plan. But even if we just knew what was going on in the media plan, knowing ahead of time that they were going to drop TV or they were going to drop radio or even do big direct mailing, we would see spikes in brand searches as our leading indicator that something else is going on. We even had Guilt Group as a client when the CEO was on, I think, Good Morning America, and oh my God, it like shot through the roof, right? And conversely, you can have negatives occur that you need to be extremely reactive to, and when you build bid management platforms, right? So we had an online music company as a client when Janet Jackson had her wardrobe malfunction.
Oh gosh.
So obviously search query volume went through the roof, but that search query volume had no buying intent. Right.
Yep.
And so you had to, you need to be able to be reactive in both a positive and negative environment to surges in interest and curiosity, because search is demand harvesting mostly.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Correct.
The person raises their hand. They said, I'm interested in this, and you want to make sure you take advantage of fulfilling that. But it's almost as much a metric as it is a form of media. Have you seen any interesting examples of where you'll see surges in spike in search behavior, and you'll actually ask the client, like, what happened?
Well, so interestingly, one of the largest clients that I've run sort of recently, I obviously had access to the full media plan because we were a full service agency. But kind of the juxtaposition. So I was running in 2 different countries, and the one country had significant, funnel, so CTV, programmatic, social, everything. I could see what was going on. I always said, I just sit at the bottom and take all the glory from everything you guys are doing. I'm just capturing this. That's it. But the other country wasn't running upper funnel the way that the main country was. And you could see it, right? Like it was just a constant struggle of just hoping, and the Performance Max. So there are some scripts out there. I don't know if you've seen there are some scripts where you can sort of get an idea of maybe what's running. I don't know. But you could your gut told you by looking at the metrics. Like I didn't even have to ask, are you doing anything? No, I can see it. It's obvious. It created a situation where you were always gritting your teeth and that account was more volatile. But then speaking of sort of a crazy situation like what you had, so I was running supplements at an agency during the Ray Lewis scandal. So it was some type of like HGH, like human growth hormone or deer antler spray, and it shot through the roof. And that company rode the coattails of that for quite some time.
Right. Yeah, though we had a lot of fun with a major wireless carrier that when a competitor of them would do a Yahoo homepage takeover, we would notice at like 5 a.m. in the morning that there was a Yahoo homepage takeover, and we would adjust our bidding strategy to actually capture the demand that they created.
Right.
With their homepage takeover. So there was a lot of fun strategies you could do. But you made a point which is also really important for people to understand, because sometimes the search team really is sitting right next to the media team, and the media team want to know, other ways to know what's working, right? And they may not have a big enough budget to do an econometric study or a fractional factorial design of an experiment, but they may be able to, for example, say, oh, well, we're buying Spotify and we're not really sure how well Spotify works. And then, you can say to them as a search marketer, well, why don't you just buy Spotify really heavy in one city, and we'll watch the analytics and we'll see if we see surges in search behavior. That's a good leading indicator to the fact that your advertising is working. Of course, it could be bad creative.
Yeah, right.
It could still fail, right? Because you need to have right message, right time, right people, right? So it's not like it's a guarantee, but you can do some really interesting A/B split tests and use search as one way to get a sense as to whether or not your other media is working.
And now the only time I've seen that not, unfortunately, necessarily work has been, I always say I say, use your branded search as a barometer, because companies are always, should I use branded search? Should I not? And I like to cap out brand first. I like to control that space. Also, brand isn't just brand anymore. Brand, we all know the match type spreads very liberally. So, because it scales what's not reasonable. So I know what's happening there, people. But when it comes to using brand as a barometer, when Performance Max came on stage, it made that conversation much harder, because we would get into the data. They would ask, is our entire branding and our rebrand and all of our big YouTube campaigns, is this working? Is the new messaging framework? And I'm like, I cannot look at your brand search. I mean, frankly, if I look at your brand search, 2020, 2021, 2022, it looks the same. But if you plot that along the lines of Performance Max, which is now taking that volume, you have a struggle there. And then what happened when Performance Max released the brand controls, I had already had those conversations with my client for a year and they stopped asking. And so now the fallback is if you can afford a rep, they can do a lift study, and they can do a search lift. They can pull some of those things, but you have to have the spend and the rep that's going to be able to pull that reporting from Google. And you're going to have to see if it's even accurate.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because a lot of folks are exasperated with some of the changes in GA4, including my team. And so once we saw what was going to disappear from GA4, I actually tasked an incubator team of mine to build sort of an adjunct that can sit right next to GA4 and give census level data, not sample data, because the new GA4 is not census level data anymore. So neither was the earlier version, but it got worse. So, analytics that can actually tell you exactly what happened down to the individual click level. We'll be releasing something towards the end of the year that can sit alongside GA4 and answer those kinds of questions, right? And if you have reports by geography, so even though you might not have it at the impression level, you'll have it at the click level, right? So you'll be able to see, did I get a surge of organic search from Cincinnati, Ohio, because that was the city I spent 3 times as much money in YouTube or Spotify or CTV. So we want to restore the ability for marketers to sort of see the cause and effect from all the marketing that they're doing, because it's important to know.
Well, and the interesting part, and this is going to kind of backtrack because I feel like you and we've been doing this for forever, right? Since it was invented. So the analytics platforms are literally taking raw data, and that raw data is actually still there. I'm shocked that, I know there's Adobe, is Overture and Web Trends, are they still even a thing anymore? I'm not sure.
Yeah, not independently. No,
I question if this is opening up an opportunity for a third party vendor again, right?
I've placed some money behind betting that it does.
and the only reason I say that is, you and I were kind of talking how you have sort of an account that you play with, right? I do too. So I still play with the SEO side of my business. So I have a website. And if I look in GA4, I'm not getting any organic traffic. And it's fairly new. But in any case, I looked at my raw server logs and I'm like, they're right there. The Google bot has been here. It just doesn't want to index it. Like, it's fine. Yeah. It's fine. I'm still getting crawled. My content just isn't plentiful or good enough at this point. But you just don't see what you used to see in GA4.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I used to be able to see that. You could see the Google, the spiders through your analytics.
Exactly. They've taken a lot of stuff out, and I've tried to sort of understand the thinking behind it. Near as I can tell, and this is just me sort of connecting the dots, but I believe that a lot of what they had to do to be GDPR compliant in Europe sort of forced them to make changes to the entire stack, and they just decided we're going to make these changes for the whole world rather than just make them in Europe. Right, and have 2 different code bases. And so, of course, for a US marketer, the US marketer is like, hey, wait, like, I liked that. Where'd it go? Could I have that back? And the answer is no, we got rid of that. So I don't know the answer to whether there's an opportunity for supplemental analytics, but I'm sort of placing a bet that there is. And by this time next year, I'll have my answer.
Yes. What's interesting is tonight when I was out with some paid search sort of colleagues in the area, I met a girl who she runs paid search here, but she's from Romania. Mm-hmm. And so she got all of her business, her paid search experience in Romania, and then came to the United States and started working. And she was telling me how different Google Ads is over there. And she said, just opening up the platform, that the features that they get are years after what we get here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so it is something to always remember, is what we see here and what we're used to working with isn't necessarily what the rest of the world is used to working with, and that those laws do impact.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But I found that fascinating. You guys said you were 2 years behind. She's like, at least.
So one of the things that continues to be important, even within the construct of Performance Max, is getting account structures right. That's something I know my team sees a lot when we do audits, and I'm sure that before you take on business, often you're doing either a free or a paid audit. We're really more of a paid audit, philosophy, because people won't pay attention to something they didn't pay for, so we sort of force them to pay for it. But are there any other things you see that sort of need TLC when you go in and do an audit?
So interestingly, at the sort of the last large agency that I worked for, they just basically go through a proposal RFP process. So I was not auditing accounts. I would just get them, and my jaw would either drop or not. And then we did do audits, but to your point, free audits at another agency. So I would say I still see very fragmented campaigns. I took over, a household name that had 55 different campaigns. And I still, when I see these types of things, and I think maybe because I've been doing it so long and I'm connected, I sort of take a deep breath and then sort of first, I don't say right or wrong. I understand how these get to where they go. And then I know the direction I want to take it in the strategy. And I am not a burn it to the ground, that is wrong person. I move it slowly to where I want it to go. Now, I've just learned that about myself. I tend to be really conservative about getting it to where it needs to go, but I do still see, your 55 very, very, very detailed campaigns, and then potentially not running Performance Max and not being up to the latest and greatest. And then I make that plan and get it there over probably like a couple months. But again, that's the old school side of me that used to deal with balls of yarn, and that has been burned by, complete restructures. I have coworkers that vehemently disagree with that and would just say they're wrong, start from scratch. And at least as far as I know, they still work and haven't been burned yet. So it's not how I handle it though. But yeah, I think you still see that. And like I said, my experience was that a business decision? Because sometimes what you'll see is campaigns that were set up that way for the report, not for the sake of running the campaign to answer larger business questions. Just because at a lot of big companies, different products have different brand management teams. And so they almost operate as a different business. Well, that's this side of the business and that's this side of the business. Yeah. And the two don't necessarily talk.
Oh, absolutely. I've had clients where there's, operational unit level P&Ls.
Yes, exactly.
You would ask, if you had somebody senior to ask, you'd say, well, but shouldn't we spend like that 10% of the least efficient budget here and move it over this other brand? They'd be like, no, the brands get separate budgets.
Right.
We're like, yeah, but it would make, an extra $1 million for the company at large. I'm like, nope, that's just not how it works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I would say I don't necessarily think that there is like a quote unquote ideal structure, but I still do the basic thing. So if I were building from scratch, or if I were to just want something to go where I want, I would start with my search campaigns. I would start with brand. I would actually probably go to Performance Max before I would go into non-brand. And the only reason that I would do that is because Performance Max starts to go into non-brand by the nature of how it bids. And I've just seen non-brand not necessarily, again, if this were e-commerce running that, it's just an uncomfortable ROAS. That's what I've seen. But again, it kind of depends on the data there. And then once I have my search and PMax, if that budget's there, I do want to run a discovery. I know that, that's now going to be demand gen. And I basically think of it like a bricks and mortar type situation. The only thing I don't run, and I haven't done this for a while, is display. We do run that through the trade desk. But again, you have to be doing the volume to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And then I do run YouTube through Google, the Google Ads platform, but a lot of larger clients will run that because they can get the premium channels through. There's a different TV I don't know if it's like a CTV, but basically you could get it placed on the premium channels. But again, that's a big spend client.
Yep. You bring up an interesting point, which is what's the philosophy or level of aggressiveness of a client and their willingness during a learning stage to accept a lower ROAS or a lower CAC while the campaign essentially goes through its own discovery mode, right? Because the more aggressive you launch, the quicker the platform learns and the quicker you learn as a human running, the levers that you can pull. But there might be a period of discomfort where you're not hitting your metrics, right? So having that conversation ahead of time ends up being really important. So when you're sort of trying to nudge the client into understanding the fact that if we were to be willing to accept, less wonderful KPIs, we could learn more quickly. Is that how you pitch it to the client about sort of speed of learning?
So I pitch it like this. I tell them I am very conservative, and this is because I am. That is how I am. I've been burned in the past. And interestingly, I'll have clients that are more aggressive than I am, and they'll say, just go ahead and do that. So and this is just my style of account management. I make everything a conversation, everything a joint decision. I am not going to dictate to you what I think should be done. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think should be done. I'm going to tell you your strategy. In fact, I will answer these questions every single day, and I'll never get tired of answering them as long as you're asking it and having that conversation. And then I tell them, here's why I'm being conservative. And then, they make that choice. And like I said, so one of the clients that I worked with probably the closest, she was just a lot more aggressive than me. She said, go for it. Just go for it. And then what we did is, I would have some of the more aggressive. So I would consider non-brand search, at least at this juncture, pretty aggressive, just because it's a little bit looser. It's a little harder to scale out like a non-brand search because it's almost like the sky's the limit in a lot of categories. And sometimes I'll have it built out and ready to turn on if they need that money and they're willing to be aggressive that month, or if we're willing to sort of take a hit on the metrics and start to grow up, and then we'll pull it back for a little bit and sort of an off on approach, which I hate saying because I believe in always on, but I'll play a little off on.
Yeah, it's interesting. We also have clients that sort of want to know at the margin, if they had extra budget, where should it go? Right. To the generics, the non-branded stuff. And what we found to be particularly effective is to know to end up segmenting by geography and using day part very heavily, right? Cherry picking out the clicks that have the best profiles through that, as opposed to going into the non-brand, across the full spectrum. We'll know ahead of time, it's going to be the richest 10% of the country that this will work for because it's a luxury brand, right? Yeah. Or, we'll say, this is the kind of thing where people like to buy it during lunch. Mm-hmm. And we'll only run at lunch, and we'll literally run it in different lunch periods depending on the time zone, right? And just cherry pick out the impressions and clicks from where we want them, as opposed to like a huge Frankenstein switch. We're like, okay, ready? Here we go.
And so I think when you and I were talking a little bit, and you were saying that you started paid search only and then expanded into full service.
Yeah.
And some of those tactics remind me of the paid search only days. Like, those tactics are generally not used across full service agencies. I'm just going to say it. They're a little bit more sophisticated. They're more data driven, and it's not that you can't employ them. It's that you have a little bit more of that budget to scale out. So if I were to be asked scale, first place I'd frankly go is Performance Max. And then, like I said, non-brand, or a little bit of Performance Max, and it's a non-brand, depending on if it was if it's e-commerce, if it's a sale period and you're breaking that sort of price threshold of your competitors, because a lot of these like high-end brands, when they start to come down on price, they match sort of that mid-tier or low-tier brand. And so that's going to determine how far I'm going to push there. I guess within the auto industry, when I was working a little bit of the smaller clients with obviously a big purchase, I would look more at those geographic details. And what sometimes we would do So we'd take Google Maps, and I had a coworker, and this is why sometimes it's good to have people that have like worked in the industry first. Like this guy was a car dealer through and through, and then he came into paid search, and we looked at the dealership, and then he literally took the Google Maps and went up the freeway and could pick out each dealership up the freeway. And he's like, okay, this is what you want to do, and just really refined in that targeting. Cause I think we were at just like a baseline of 25 miles, and you could go wider or bigger depending, like this was in San Antonio, like it's going to be further driving distances. It's going to be a little bit different, but had he not mapped up the main road, he wouldn't have known where to sort of push that targeting. Yeah. And same thing happened for him. So I remember, I always laugh at this one. So we were in Destin for a month. Like my family was just vacationing there. We lived there for a month. And he happened to be running a car dealership based in the Miramar Beach area, but it was a big monster truck. Like that's what they were. And I was like, this is like, you couldn't even get a monster truck in these little small, hoity-toity, like, I don't, they call them like, I don't know, plantations in Hilton Head, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're gated communities. Yeah. These are tight. These are expensive condos. Like these were not monster truck people. Yeah, he was wondering why his campaign wasn't converting. I said, you need to move up towards where they had a military base. Move up this way and move your targeting up there, because nobody's driving those, buying those here. We're vacationers and rich old people.
Yeah. Well, so geography is a super important variable, yeah. Not just in paid search. It's a super important variable for CTV and other forms of media, because where you live and where you work tells us a lot about you.
Well, and we had that. So I had, a brand, which, stereotypically would have been purchased by some people, yet the client was wanting it running where their executives were running. And they were like, we want this to be in, Nantucket during the day on the Golf Channel. Your client is watching this at 2 a.m. On some other channel. And also you can't afford the CPCs. So, they wanted to see their commercials, and we were always having that conversation about that. I think that was, and they called them VIP markets, so they would get on the phone and be like, we need to be running in these VIP markets.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, right? Yeah. Where we do that and specifically target the headquarters of the
100%.
Because the CEO wants to rank number one for a keyword that if we were to do that everywhere, they'd go out of business. But
yes,
right, we could do it.
100%. That was the outcome. Some tough conversations. Yeah, I mean, I think, and to your point, I think with geography, even you had mentioned the purchasing power of the country. We are coming into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and I always talk about. So I'm in Ohio, and I actually, having 3 kids, and I wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning. I go to bed at 8 or 9, and so I would wake up, check my campaigns. I would be panicking, and then around noon, I might feel a little better, but I wasn't sure what was going on 5. I was comfortable enough to maybe have a glass of wine. When I went to bed at 9, I was okay. And then I'd wake up the next morning and my jaw would just be dropped. And I'm like, California shopped. They shopped. It was like all that money of that West Coast, on these luxury goods. And it was just, and 9 p.m. on the East Coast is probably early. Right. So it's just knowing the geography and then sort of the country and stuff like that. The Canada buying is different. I guess Black Friday is like a trained holiday for them because they're not Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And just having a sensitivity about that. But it's like we tend to look and say, why aren't they converting like this? Well, it's a consumer holiday for them. It's like Hallmark.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what has you excited about the next year? It's sort of a final question, either for your own business or just for the larger ecosystem.
I mean, I guess for my own business, I would say just the conversations that I'm having. I know you and I talked about this ahead of time, is just really seeing that there are a lot of people in the world that still need paid search desperately. They just don't know how to execute it. And these aren't just companies that have no budget. These are large companies. I think learning a little bit more about the venture space, just where the money's going right now, I thought was just absolutely fascinating. It turns out that there's a lot of money going into tech defense, so tech defense basically, which historically hadn't gone there. That could be an entire full podcast talking about why it wasn't going there, as a lot of like do no harm type things. So just seeing where money is flowing that naturally is going to need that support, because a lot of times we talk about, such and such product, but I mean, you and I were talking about how you're in the B2B space. And if that's where the money's going, they're going to have other vendors and partners that they're going to work with that are going to need to make themselves available to these larger technologies and clients and all the SaaS that goes with it. So I don't think this is going away. And then I would also say just, from the times that, working at a full service agency that's funded a lot of just market research, people are online, like humans are online. And so again, it's just more validation that it's okay to be in Google, even in sort of what we would call like a B2B SaaS space, like run on YouTube, because guess what? Your clients are watching it.
Yep.
It's
absolutely YouTube's
more and more.
the largest search engine, and I'll absolutely validate. We do e-com and B2B are our two biggest categories, and for sure, we've seen so many search campaigns from fairly reputable large agencies that really, either due to their fact that they were legacy campaigns or just the person running it wasn't properly trained, that have huge opportunities. So I agree with you. There's a tremendous opportunity, and search is sufficiently different that it does sometimes get carved out and either goes to a specialist like yourselves or my specialist team. And so I agree, there's huge opportunity in search. And it's not set it and forget it, even with Performance Max. I think
no.
Make Performance Max, set it and forget it. But the reality is it still requires TLC.
TLC, we call it air traffic controlling, right? Like I don't have to make a change, but my eyes have to be on those campaigns. I would agree 100%. I can't even imagine set it and forget it.
Some people do that, obviously,
right.
Especially understaffed agencies will do that. And the client doesn't always know. Well, I look forward to seeing you at Brighton, and thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with everyone on paid search.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.